So today our first presentation is from Tiffany Lohwater, who is Director of Meetings and Public Engagement and Deputy Chief Communications Officer at the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Today, she will be talking about communicating science and engaging the public. Tiffany, are you ready to get started?
I sure am. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you for joining us today, everybody. As mentioned, I'm Tiffany Lohwater, and I work at the American Association for the Advancement of Science in Washington, D.C. I'm hoping that the sirens hold out while I give my talk today, as we do sometimes have that as we're going by. So hopefully, if anyone has a hard time hearing me, you'll let us know in the chat. My Twitter handle is @Tiffany Lohwater if any of you tweet, and I'd be happy to get your comments that way, as well as in the chat box, of course. So I did want to talk a little bit about my organization. For those of you who may not be familiar, AAAS publishes Science Magazine. That's how many people know about us. But we also have lots of programmatic activities, including education, global outreach, policy and advocacy here in Washington, D.C., as well as around the world, and public engagement, which is one of the things I'm going to talk to you about today. If you're not yet a member of AAAS and would like to be, we encourage you to. And there's a quick link down there, AAAS.org/join, if you're interested in learning more. To get started, I'm going to talk to you specifically today about communicating science. And just so you know that this comes from a long tradition at AAAS, we have a Center for Public Engagement with Science and Technology. We do seminars and workshops for scientists all around the country and around the world. We do workshops, we have programs, and we have many online resources. So for those of you who are interested in learning more than we could possibly go through in an hour-long conversation, I would suggest you visit our website. It's AAAS.org, and our quick way to get there is type in PES. So I just wanted to start. I like to start with a little bit of humor. Hopefully some of you are familiar with PhD Comics. It's one of my sources of entertainment some days. I'll just give you a second to read this. So hopefully you had time to look at that. I think this is one of the challenges that many scientists and researchers face. They want to be engaging. They want to involve people. They're doing their work for something that they feel is really important. But they have a hard time sometimes when other people want to engage in their research and understand what's going on, how to get through all of the information, particularly if somebody's reading a paper who doesn't have the same knowledge that you do, or potentially even the same technical language that we sometimes include in our papers. It can be really challenging for those who care about us to engage with us in conversations about our work. So remember that, and then think about other people that you might be interested in reaching with your work. Members of the public, which can be many different kinds of audiences, perhaps the people that you're hoping to benefit through your work. How are you making sure that you're communicating with them in a way that they can participate in the conversation? I think communicating about research is really hard, but if you can't find language of someone you care about to engage in conversation, it's going to be hard to have a meaningful exchange about the idea. So just consider that the language that we use oftentimes, jargon, is a big piece of this, but there's lots of other things going on as well. In fact, when we do workshops for scientists, we often show them this graph because I think it's a good way to show the difference between communicating to other researchers in your field and then communicating to public audiences. So if you think about the typical journal article, you'd likely begin by offering an extensive background on the topic you're studying, trying to answer questions like what were we investigating? What other investigations have people done on this topic? What do we know about this? And then you provide some supporting details, outlining methods you use to investigate your question, maybe a little bit about the challenges you faced. And then at the very end, typically you finish with a summary of the results, findings, and conclusions of your study. Typically when you're talking with a member of the public, which as I mentioned could be lots of different kinds of people, but I'm specifically referring to people who aren't experts in your field, they're going to want to know the bottom line. What is it that you found? And most importantly, I think next is, so what? Why should I care about this? How does it affect me in my life? Who is this going to benefit? And then the supporting details often come later. So additional information is great, but it's really hard to hook someone and get interested in your work if you start with all your supporting details in the beginning. And yet, as researchers, that's often how we're talking to each other. So I think this is one of the major challenges that scientists are given when they're trying to figure out ways to communicate outside of their own expertise. And now I'm going to ask, and I realize you all are remote, so you're probably not going to be able to participate so much except for questions at the end. But I did want to talk a little bit about some of the issues that are interface with science and society. And you'll notice that disability and rehabilitation research are not listed here, but obviously it could be added along with many other different kinds of issues where scientists are trying to make a difference and give information because there are societal issues that are going on that people need that information to do. So this is one of the things where we sit and we think, what are all the areas where science is interacting with society and could potentially help benefit if the connections between society and science were better? So one of the major reasons why...
Tiffany,
yes.
Tiffany, excuse me, this is Joanne. For those of our participants who may not be able to see the slides, could you read off some of those important issues?
Oh, sure, absolutely, yes. I wasn't aware that that would be an issue. Sure. So some of the issues that I have a hard time reading slides because I don't want to repeat everything that is being in front of you, but I understand that might be an issue. So some of the issues that I'll just do a couple of them just to give you a sense. National security issues, social inequality, education, space exploration, genetic medicine, infectious diseases, energy policy. All of these are examples of things where there's a lot going on in research that could potentially be useful for society if there were better connections between science and society, which is part of the reason why we're hoping that researchers can increase their communication skills and their outreach to help inform those types of issues. I hope that was more helpful. I'll try to do that more as I go on as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So, and for those of you who can't see, I'll try to describe this framework a little bit. At AAAS, we talk a bit about how a scientist is operating within their own independent work, and they may have messages that they want to reach with their audiences. So for example, if a scientist is talking to a member of the public, they have a message they want to get out. And then we're hopeful that the audience will then provide feedback so that the scientist knows, okay, this is what they're interested in, or here are the pieces of this that are helpful to them. Let me talk more about that. Oftentimes, scientists may have goals related to their communication, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but sometimes they don't. And I think most of us who do communication for a living wish that there were a bit more strategic in terms of what is it you're trying to accomplish when you talk to public audiences. What are your goals for the communication? What are you hoping to get out of this? And we can talk about what some sample goals might be in a moment. The other thing I wanted to mention is that obviously an individual scientist or an organization is operating within a much larger framework, which is society. So scientific institutions are part of society, and they are just one input into all of the things that people are hearing about different issues. And so that's something I think that's important to keep in mind as well. It's great if there are large goals in terms of societal goals for science and science information, but I think it's also important for individual scientists to think, how do I fit within that larger framework? So now we're going to talk a little bit more about goal. And your goal will help you determine your target audience and the messages you'd like to use to engage your audience with key ideas. So I think it's very important for scientists to start there when they're thinking about doing public communication. What is the goal that will help you evaluate your success? And I am getting a little bit of sirens. Hopefully it's not bothering any of you. So we as scientists, we do quite a bit of research here at AAAS on our own members as well as other organizations that we know of. And we ask them, why are you participating in communication engagement activities? We like to try to equip people with resources to do that better. So we also would like to know, how do we get this even better to understand what's going on in these issues? So I think the way to do that is really to sit and think, what is your goal? Why are you doing this work? Many scientists want to foster trust between scientists and society. I think that's a laudable goal. I think it's hard to do that in a short term, but it's a great long-term goal. Many scientists are also interested in getting others excited about science. They want to make sure that other people understand the importance of what they're doing and are excited about the work that's happening. We find that many researchers want to promote the use of research in decision-making. In fact, even that comes up higher listing than even I had thought when we started doing our survey as a scientist. That they want to make sure that the research they're doing has an impact, either individual decision-making or joint decision-making, whether it be through policy or other types of issues. And I think one thing that's become very interesting in working on this over the years, many scientists are starting to tell us that this brings meaning to their work and increases skills for other areas of their career. So what that means is that they are saying, oh, this is actually valuable for me and what I do, and I want to make sure other people can understand the value of it, but it actually helps me as a person. This makes the work more relevant and meaningful to me, It allows me to be recognize the participation of my work in a much broader way. And it can help me with other areas of my own career, such as writing grant proposals, publishing, talking with other scientists who are not in my field. It actually helps me become a better communicator in a much bigger way. So I would ask for those of you who are interested in doing more public communication, or maybe already are doing a lot of public communication, for you to think about what your goal is. What is it that you're hoping to accomplish, and how are you going to get there? Okay, so now we're going to move to the next thing in our framework. We really talk through, just so you know, goal, audience, and messages. So typically when I have these types of discussions, we're doing maybe a longer opportunity where scientists have an opportunity to practice each of these. And I recognize that's not going to be possible today with the time that we have. But I'm walking you through what we would typically do in terms of thinking about your goal, thinking about your audiences, and thinking about your messages. So the next one on our list is audience. And these, again, are things that I hope you can all get these slides later, and you'll be able to walk through this a little bit more when you have time to think through it. But just for now, when we talk about audience, how do you define your audience? What are the things that you might think about in order to know more about who you're talking to? And when I say audience, that's also kind of a tricky word, because it doesn't necessarily mean somebody who's just sitting there to listen to you, which I think is what audience sometimes connotes. In communication work, we're talking about someone who is a recipient of your message, but also providing you feedback on your message. This is not just someone who's sitting back and listening to everything you have to say. You're trying to get them interested in what you have to say enough to participate in a conversation. So I would always ask you to challenge yourself to think about, how am I including their input into my work? How is this useful information for me to be able to be a better communicator? Some of the things you might think about are in terms of their demographics. So if there's age, gender, ethnicity differences in your audiences, that's important to note. What their culture is, and geographic location. So I'll give you an example. One time we had a scientist in one of our workshops who was doing a research project, doing field work right down the street from where she was going to be giving a public talk. And she said, well, I want to talk to them all about what my work's about, and I want to tell them about these animals that I'm finding, but do you think I should tell them where exactly I'm doing this work? And I said, yes, absolutely. That is the reason why people will be interested in your work, because they actually live there. Those are cohabitants of that place. And so that would be a wonderful way to connect with your audience, to show them that you're doing something that's actually valuable and interesting to them. And that gets to another point, the level of understanding and interest. I know oftentimes scientists struggle with how to position their work in terms of understanding. There's a lot of scientists, I think, who are scared to talk too technical language, or too much expect that there will be too high of a scientific knowledge of their topic in order to have a connection and to really understand where people are coming from. But I would also say you should be thinking about their interest. So sometimes people may have low understanding in a topic, but they may have high interest. Or it can go vice versa, or it can be both. It may be low understanding and low interest. So what are you going to do to think through, how am I going to get people interested in this enough to want to listen more and have a conversation? Experiences with your topic. If this is something that they themselves deal with every day, if this is an issue that is relevant to them or their family, obviously they're going to be high interest in thinking about the areas of topic that you're covering. So, targeting your audiences in a way that is appreciative of their experience and their interest. And recognize that there are different values and concerns about topics, and those values and concerns may be different than yours. So I think that's important, again, when you're thinking about how to broaden your communication among a broader population for your audience, not just within scientists. How can you broaden thinking about what are the different values and concerns about the work that you're talking about? So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to define your audience. What are the resources that might be available? Sometimes when you're giving a public event, that would be a great person who's organizing, facilitating, in this case, the organizers of this conference, to ask, what are the types of people who are going to be there? Who usually comes to these types of things? Are they interested in this topic? Have you had something on this before? Is there something happening in the community that's relevant to this? I think those are all great opportunities to ask questions of the event organizer. You may also have a communications officer. So if you are working in a university or a hospital or an institution that has paid communications staff, they can be great resources for you in thinking how to reach different audiences. Or you may have colleagues Colleagues are people who have done the type of communication that you're interested in and done the kind of engagements that you're seeking to do. Ask them what's worked for them. Ask them the challenges that they faced. Talk to them about their pointers for getting more information on the audiences. If you're giving a talk for a specific organization, what are the materials and websites that might be available that where you can do, we have this great ability now to do searches online. How are we getting information that way? And can we get can we get additional information based on the audience of the people we're trying to reach? And on the spot, if you're giving a talk somewhere, one way to ask people, if they're able to participate, is to ask a question straight out to the audience so that you can get a sense as to their interest or their understanding of the topic. How many people saw the article today that was talking about this or the other thing? And see how many, by a show of hands, how many people participate. Or ask what they know about a certain topic and what their interests are. And social media search is a great opportunity as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a moment. But I think that's another place where you can get a lot of information based on what people are talking about on different topics. So now I'm going to talk a little bit more about messages. How do you come up with the messages that you want to make? And I think, as I mentioned before, this can be a real challenge for scientists because they have so much information they maybe want to get out. So getting down to the type of information that they want to, kind of filtering their messages down to the core and figuring out what it is exactly you want to say. And I've talked with many scientists about why this is such an issue. I think oftentimes their messages for their peers may be very different than their messages for the broader public, so that's something to think about. What are the messages for the audiences that I'm trying to reach? What would be most compelling for them? And at AAAS, when we teach these concepts, we talk about the 3 M's of message. Miniature is one M, memorable is the second M, and meaningful. So for example, this is one example of a message that was developed at one of our workshops. The goal in the audience for the person who was developing this message was that she wanted to convey to HR professionals and parents that workplace policies can reduce postpartum depression. So she had a specific audience in mind. She was going to be working with HR professionals at businesses and also to parents as a separate audience. But the message was very similar. Workplace policies can reduce postpartum depression. So she created 3 key points for her message. They were parental leave was 1 point, 2 was job flexibility, and 3 was workplace support. And the great opportunity with a message like this is, based on the audience discussion and what the interest is, you could touch on any of those points. If someone came and said, well, I'd really like to hear more about parental leave. I actually had a challenge with that recently in my own job. Then she can talk more specifically about that issue. And so it gives your audience a menu, or it gives them some things to choose from in terms of the types of things they want to hear more about. Sometimes you'll have more interest in one point than another, and that's to be expected based on people's own experiences. You can see how this message would be conveyed in different ways for different audiences. I did briefly want to talk about jargon. I think the scientific community in general, and then I think
Excuse me, Tiffany, this is Joanne again. Sorry to interrupt you. Can you try and slow down just a little bit, please?
Oh, sure. Am I going too fast?
Just a little bit. Thanks.
Okay, sure. So I did want to talk a little bit more about jargon. I mentioned this earlier, that we have a lot of terms in the community in the different scientific fields that mean certain things to us and that we refer to. I think also acronyms are a big example of this. We often use acronyms as shorthand, and jargon can be shorthand or have technical meaning. But be careful, because oftentimes public audiences don't know the jargon, they don't know the acronyms. And so what you may be communicating to them is, here's something that you don't understand. And so it's very hard, I think, for scientists to sometimes step outside of their jargon and think about how to talk about their work in ways that's a bit more broad. But it is really important, because it's not only the jargon piece that you're communicating that is tough for other people to interact with, but it can also be kind of condescending and telling people they don't fit into this conversation if you're using acronyms and jargon that they just don't understand. So right away it's communicating, this is not for you. And I think we have to be careful about doing that. Also, another thing that we've noticed in our workshops when we do them, sometimes we'll have different kinds of scientists in our workshops, so a chemist and a biologist, or a chemist and physicist, for example. And when the scientists get up to practice their messages, the physicist will raise their hand and says, oh, that word means something totally different in my field. So I think for those scientists who work across fields or who work more often with public as patients or as other audiences, they have a real recognition of how this can be a challenge even within the community, and even more so once you're trying to go out to a broader community. So it's something to really pay attention to. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about what kinds of opportunities might be available. I know many of you probably are engaging with patients and with others on a regular basis in terms of direct interaction, but I thought I would think through a little bit more what kinds of opportunities might be available for you outside of those. So some of the things that we talk about at AAAS are the fact that there's traditional media type of engagements. So that would be the news media, so reporters calling you and asking you for an interview, doing video recordings, that type of thing. There's also in-person engagements, right, like speaking opportunities and other opportunities to talk to people one-on-one or in a group setting about your work. And then there's online. And again, I would refer you to our website. And the quick way to get there is AAAS.org/PES. There's also a longer websites for all of the different resources that are on there. But the fast way to find all of our resources, again, is AAAS.org/PES. So I'd encourage you all, if you're interested in different types of opportunities, to find those on our website. There are lots of different ways to engage with the public. And as I mentioned, there's the traditional media in terms of newspapers, magazines, television, radio. Many are the journalists who are telling stories via these opportunities. And I think it's really great for campuses and organizations and universities and hospitals and all those different organizations that have communications professionals who can connect you with journalists who are covering your topic. Oftentimes they know, they read, they know who's covering different issues. They can set you up as a source for journalists. And so I would really encourage you with your institutions to reach out to them if you're not already on their expert list or know about what they do. You can search them and find the media relations offices who can help you prepare your messages, practice doing interviews, give you some things to think about based on their experience. I think one of the biggest challenges today with journalism is that they're on very quick deadlines. Often journalists are turning things around very quickly. And so it really does help to have a communications professional who can help you understand what the needs are of the journalists who are doing this, what their deadlines are, and help you also get some sources together in case you need to do some additional help before doing the interview. In-person opportunities. I really wish that the scientists I work with would take advantage of these more. I think we all are sometimes traveling or in places where we can be given an opportunity without us even thinking about it to talk about what we do. And I'm always encouraged when I hear people say, oh, I'm a scientist and I do this, that, and the other. I'm like, oh, I work with the science community too. And I think it's great that you feel comfortable talking about that, because sometimes scientists shy away from those conversations, particularly if they work on issues where they don't feel comfortable talking about their work. But every time you have a chance to talk about what you do, I think it's a great opportunity to introduce your work to someone new and to find out what they're interested in about your work, what questions they might have for you. But more formalized in-person opportunities would be things like meeting with policymakers, whether they be state, local, or national, or international even. Doing public lectures. I know many of you are probably involved with opportunities to talk about your work in more public ways and more public settings at your university, at other types of lecture opportunities, community organizations, that type of thing. Science festivals. I would be curious to know if any of you have been involved in any of the science festivals that are in your communities, which have become very popular in recent years. Many cities and other areas are constantly adding to their science festival. And science cafe opportunities, that's another one where scientists gather, give a quick presentation, and then facilitate conversation with the people who attend. There's also museums, whether they be science museums or other health science museums, other opportunities, and libraries. Libraries are such a great resource in our communities, and oftentimes people go there looking for information. Citizen science, I think, is something that's coming up in recent years, is becoming more accessible for many people in different areas. So how are citizens getting involved with scientific research projects? And I know some scientists who are very active in that world as well. Talking to your community, finding different opportunities through senior centers, Rotary clubs, local schools, whether they be elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, places that are interested in these types of issues. Teachers are a great resource as well in terms of reaching students and their families. Doing hands-on science activities. So one great way to get people interested and think about science is to have them actually experience doing science. So to show them what you're working on and to actually create opportunities and activities for them to engage in it that way. And then doing lab visits or campus events, having people actually come into your place and see what work you're doing, I think is a great opportunity for people to get a better sense of what you do and ask you the kinds of questions that you could help facilitate exchange of learning. I'm going to talk a little bit about online opportunities. So I think this is something, obviously it's a very fastly growing opportunity in terms of communication. We used to, for many years, talk about online as new media. And I think that that's probably faded now because it's not new anymore. It's been with us for many decades. But obviously many of these social platforms such as Facebook and Twitter and blogs, YouTube, all of those things have grown. And it's been really interesting to watch over the years how they've become more of an opportunity for people to get information. I think originally we were hopeful that there would be all these great online opportunities and people would have access to more science, and that would be great because then they would understand better about the scientific community and what types of things laid there. I think one of the challenges is that people can pick and choose what they pay attention to now. And oftentimes they're not even really choosing. There may be a Google algorithm that feeds it to them, or their Facebook page where they get information, the kinds of information that they want. So I think that's a big challenge for us in the scientific community. How are we facilitating conversations with people where they're not necessarily seeking science information? They may just want to hear about their friends and family and choose not to look at any other news, really, or news that's more relevant and interesting to them than science is. So I think this is a huge opportunity for science communication. I also think it's a big challenge. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the specifics there because there's actually research that's going on about social media platforms. And I think it's starting to become very interesting in terms of what people are doing on social sites. And in the future will be even more interesting because there's going to be more studies done and we'll have more of a sense of what people are actually doing there. Facebook obviously is the most popular social networking site in the United States. Not in the whole world, but in the United States it is. 71% of U.S. adults who are online are on Facebook, so it's pretty ubiquitous at this point. It's been growing at a very large rate. Facebook is often more personal, but there is an opportunity on Facebook to have public profiles. This is something I've been watching in recent years. Many scientists who are quite popular in their fields have public profile Facebook pages whereby whatever they post can be seen by anyone if you Google them, or if you look at them up on Facebook, it's not a private closed wall page. There's actually quite a bit of people participating in that space. So that should be interesting to see. One thing that we found about Facebook, and there's been some research done on this in terms of what scientists are doing on Facebook, but there will be more, I'm sure, is that many scientists are doing personal things on Facebook, as you might imagine, but they are not, oh, looks like I lost my screen. Someone pull that back up for me?
Lauren, if you can pull that up.
I think I may have hit a wrong button. So I'll just keep talking about Facebook. As it's become more interesting that people are using it for their personal lives, you share your pictures of children there, or you have conversations with your friends. Many scientists maybe don't talk so much about their work on Facebook, but it is a great way if you have a circle of friends, particularly friends and family who aren't in research, to try to share a little bit about what you do. And it's wonderful practice in terms of getting additional feedback from people on what they're interested in, what kinds of questions they have about what you do. So it is something I encourage scientists who do Facebook, if you're game for it, to try doing some more posts about your work online and see what kind of response that you get. And it might be good practice for doing more broad dissemination of your work.
Do you see the slides again?
I do. Does everybody else?
Okay. I think so.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. And then Twitter, I think, is an interesting case because it's a very prominent social networking site in terms of science communication. One of the things that's not listed on this slide, but that I'll tell you, is many journalists use Twitter. So they're actually finding sources on Twitter. They're following conversations on Twitter. They're talking to each other, but they're also, many scientists find that this is a ripe area for exploration in terms of finding ways to make contacts with journalists and to build relationships within the community. Only 23% of U.S. online adults are on Twitter, which is obviously not as high as the greater than 70% for Facebook. But it is used for conversations, and it is an open platform. So one of the things that's nice about that is anyone can access Twitter. You don't have to have an account. You can search things all the time. You can go in there to see what people are saying about specific topics, what kind of news is being shared. It's interesting, but you also have to realize from a demographic standpoint, it's limited. And there's a lot more information about this. I don't think I didn't list them on these slides, but Pew Research, the Pew Research Center, does a lot of data in terms of social networking sites and how it's used to share news. So I would direct you, if this is something you're interested in, to go there. And of course, there are science communication researchers who are doing quite a bit of work in terms of figuring out what kinds of conversations about science are happening online and getting in more information about the types of people who are sharing that information. So more should be coming on that too. And Joanne's reminding everyone that the hashtag for this conference is hashtag KTDRR16. She just put that in the chat for any of you who tweet. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the major goals for us in terms of having scientists participate in public communication is to get audience feedback. I think scientists are often comfortable maybe saying their messages, and obviously with peers, it's more an opportunity for scientists to talk to scientists. But for those who are interested in doing more public communication, incorporating audience feedback and understanding your audience better in order to create messages and have responses that are relevant to them is really important. And so we're heartened by the fact that there are so many scientists out there who want to be better communicators, and we hope that you all find opportunities to practice them and to get feedback from your audiences so that you understand what their interests are in your work and how you can better present your information to be relevant to their lives. I'm going to talk a little bit about AAAS opportunities, and then hopefully if we have time for a couple questions before the break, just so that you have a sense of what types of things AAAS is doing in this space as well. So some of you may be aware that AAAS has a Science and Technology Policy Fellowship. Every year, people apply for this quite prestigious fellowship. You have to have a PhD in order to apply, and you must be a U.S. citizen. But you spend 1 year or up to 3 years in the D.C. area at different executive, legislative, and judicial branches. So you get the opportunity to learn firsthand about policymaking and implementation about policy, and also provide knowledge and analytical skills to federal government. As I mentioned, you have to have a PhD and a U.S. citizenship to apply, but it's quite a popular program. Our applications for that are due November 1st, so they're coming up quite soon. And you can find out more about this fellowship at AAAS.org/policy-fellowships. As I mentioned, it's quite prestigious in terms of competitiveness. There are many scientists, I'm heartened to know, that want to have a better impact into policy and learn more about policy so they can be more effective in that area. So if you're interested in policy, that fellowship may be for you. There's also a AAAS Mass Media Science and Engineering Fellowship. So this is an opportunity. It's only a 10-week fellowship, so it's not a 1-year-long commitment. It's a 10-week collaboration with media professionals at radio and television stations, newspapers, and magazines. So this is open to college and university students. You must be enrolled as a college or university student or have just completed a degree within 1 year in order to apply for this program. You must be a U.S. citizen or hold a visa if you would like to apply. This is quite a long website, but if you just Google AAAS Mass Media Fellowships, you'll come up to the page where it has application. Those applications are due in January, so you have a bit more time for this one. But I think it's a really great opportunity for scientists who maybe have done media in the past, who've done journalism, but interested to learn more about how the journalism side works, because you get to spend 10 weeks in a newsroom, a place many of us don't get to see on a regular basis. So it's a really great opportunity to better understand. The scientists who do this fellowship actually come out, sometimes they end up going into a news career. So this would be like a stepping stone for them to do work as a journalist. But many of them often come out with a better appreciation for how journalism works. So then they may be writers or are better able to pitch their research to journalists, having had this kind of intense 10-week experience. So that's a great opportunity if you're interested in learning more about journalism and media. And then this one's near and dear to my heart because it's one that I work on, the Alan Leshner Leadership Institute for Public Engagement with Science. So as I mentioned, this bidirectional dialogue, meaning scientists can have conversation one way, but we also want to make sure we're better understanding where the public is on different issues and how they understand these things. This fellowship empowers mid-career scientists. So this is a bit different than some of the other more early career opportunities. But we're basically empowering scientists to communicate effectively about science society issues. So each year we're choosing one issue. The first year was climate change. The next year is infectious disease researchers. So if any of you have colleagues that work in that area or contacts that you know in that work, I would ask for your help in getting applications for that. Those are due November 1st. These fellowships get 1 week of training in DC, but year-long staff support. So instead of coming to DC and staying here for the year and working in policy, for example, we're asking scientists to come here for 1 week of training and networking, and then they go back to their institutions, whether it be academic, industry, nonprofit, otherwise, in order to have 1 year of public engagement planning and activities, and then they get staff support from AAAS. So we actually help them facilitate those activities throughout the year. The website for that fellowship is AAAS.org/Leshner. And for those of you who might be aware, this is named in honor of the CEO Emeritus of Alan Leshner, who started the Center for Public Engagement here at AAAS and retired about a year ago. One more thing. I think this is the last one. We have so many things that we work on at AAAS. We just wanted to make sure you're aware of some of the ones we thought you might be interested in. AAAS does have an early career award for public engagement with science. The idea being we want to encourage early career scientists who demonstrate excellence in doing public engagement. So while they're still doing their work and they're still trying to build their careers, but they also feel a strong need and desire to give back and to do public engagement in terms of helping people understand their work and engage with it and find out ways to participate. So this award is given. Our applications just passed for this year, so sorry if you were hopeful to apply, but we've just finished our application deadline October 15th. But we will do this every year, so there's an opportunity to apply for next year. And this is early career scientists. We typically define that as 7 years or less post their terminal degree. More information about that, including past winners, if you're interested to see, is AAAS.org/PES award. And information can also be found, as I mentioned before, at our quick site, AAAS.org/PES. Oh, I do have a couple more. For those of you who are interested in education opportunities, Science does a lot of annotating of scientific research papers and accompanying materials. So basically to translate our papers into language that's appropriate for high school and undergraduate students to be able to help and develop teaching materials for teachers and others. So these are basically volunteer contributions that scientists make to help translate. This is a great opportunity if you're thinking of how to translate your work into areas that other audiences could understand. So if you're writing for a high school audience, it would be different than what the language you would typically use for Science magazine. So helping make those connections is really important. And if you're interested in education, we'd welcome you to volunteer for this. This is scienceintheclassroom.org. This is ongoing, no deadline. We also have a wonderful new opportunity in terms of online collaboration and communication at AAAS. We started this group at Trellis Science. So I'll spell out the URL for those of you who aren't reading it on the slide. It's Trellis, Trellis, science.com/public engagement. So Trellis Science, there's just one S. It's TRELLISCIENCE.com/public engagement. If you go to that webpage, you can ask for an invitation to come into a group where we discuss public engagement. So it's scientists connecting with people who do public engagement, professional communicators, as well as the scientists who study public engagement and science communication. So it's a great opportunity to join in discussions, get resources with communication, and also collaborate and talk to others who are interested in science communication and public engagement. If you don't have resources like that in your own communities, it's great to find them in an online community like this one. So I'd encourage you all to go there if you're interested in having those types of conversations with others. Okay, and here's the rest of my information. If you're interested in emailing me, feel free to email me directly. I'll spell it out for you. It's T. Lohwater, without the R, TLOHWATE at AAAS.org is my email. As I mentioned before, we have lots of resources online, AAAS.org/communicating-science, or the quick way to get there is AAAS.org/PES. Lots of resources for scientists you're welcome to use. Share with your institutions or anyone else you think you might be interested. We do workshops like this, but in-person opportunities where we help scientists practice their messages and audiences and have a bit more time to talk and collaborate with others. If you're interested in that, feel free to go to our website and get more information about that. And I think we have some time for questions, Joanne, if anyone's interested.
We do have some time. Thank you very much, Tiffany. I made a couple of notes while you were talking. We had a comment that came through in the chat box and wanted to ask you what you thought about it. The comment was, be sure to touch base with the media relations people within your organization first. I guess this was when you were talking about making those contacts about media relations.
Yes, absolutely. And so that was one of the things we always try to encourage scientists to recognize, that there are media relations staff or communication staff at most institutions. And we would encourage you to talk to them. They are professionals and know a lot of the contacts in journalism and can get you resources that you need, help you do interviews, help you think about your messages. Absolutely, I agree. And the problem is some people don't have media relations staff at their institutions. I would encourage you to look them up, and most scientists do have them at their institutions, and they just aren't aware of who they are. So you do have ways to find that out within your own institutions. I absolutely agree that that's a wonderful resource, especially for scientists and researchers who are short on time but want to contribute.
Great, thank you. I wanted to ask you also, the slide that you showed about Facebook, you said that 70% of the people are on Facebook. Do you see this really being a useful tool for the scientists? I know you did talk about it a little bit. Is Facebook the most useful way, or are there other of the social media that might be more useful for the scientists to actually share their research information?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question. I think one of the one of the ways I would answer it is thinking about what your goal is and who the audience is you're trying to reach. So this is just kind of a short summary. We actually have a social media module where we go through this in much more detail, and I think you all also had some additional social media help from some of from the conference. It's a tough question. I think the social media space is evolving. Facebook has obviously come to dominate in certain areas. I think for scientists who are interested in practicing their messages, their research messages with a somewhat friendly audience, if they have a Facebook profile and they have friends and family that they're connecting with, it's a great opportunity to kind of do that, to think about sharing information or providing context for information that their family and friends might appreciate. I actually think if more scientists did that, they'd have more practice doing communication. And as I mentioned, there are opportunities to do public profiles. So if you got to, you feel like you're an expert in your field and you want to provide context for different things that are happening, that can be a great opportunity. Although, as I mentioned, because it is often a walled community, you're not seeing anything other than other people you're connected to most times. There are challenges associated with that if you're trying to reach a broader public or you have more specific audiences that you're not directly connected to on Facebook. So I think it does come down to your goal and your audiences that you're trying to reach and thinking about if Facebook is an effective mechanism for doing that. And as I mentioned, I think Twitter, because it's a public space where many journalists are watching, that can be an opportunity too if you're trying to reach a journalist community.
Thank you. One of the other things that I noticed going by in the chat box while you were talking, we had some international people responding saying that, for example, Facebook was #1 in Australia. And so I wondered if you could comment a little bit more on sort of the utility of social media as far as making international communication and contacts.
Yeah, that's a great question. Because Facebook and even things like Twitter are often in different countries, so many people are following them, there's great opportunities there. And in fact, there are other social platforms. So for example, in China has something called Weibo, and that's the biggest social media platform. So I do think when you're investigating international audiences, figuring out which ones you're trying to reach for different purposes, looking at what they have available and what's popular, and how they're being used, really like the cultural understanding of the platforms is really important too. So as I mentioned, the Pew Research Center has quite a bit of research in terms of use of different social platforms. Many of that is U.S. and Europe-based, but they do also have some things for other countries as well. And I know they're doing increasing amount of work in terms of better understanding social media use in Africa and Asia and all the continents, basically, because it's becoming an opportunity to share information across borders.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Let's see if we have any other questions. I see a couple of people typing in the chat box. We'll see if they can, here we go. Can more examples be provided or referenced relative to effective messaging addressing the bottom line or the so what questions?
So I can talk a little bit more about that. I don't want to spend too much time. There are quite a bit of resources on this, again, on our website that I would refer people to. And obviously, when you have time to do this in a practice way and have kind of feedback and coaching, it really helps. But in terms of thinking about your messages, I would really get you to think through, obviously first defining your audience, who it is you're trying to reach, because your messages may be different for different audiences. And then really thinking through what are the 3 main points that I want to try to get across in this communication, whatever the communication is. What are the 3 things that I want people to remember or know afterwards? And keep it short and simple. Memorable, meaningful, and miniature. Miniature being short. Don't make them 3 paragraphs each. But kind of come up with the 3 concepts or the 3 main messages that you want to get across. And then realize that you can kind of outline underneath them. I always think of that as kind of your outline. If you had 2 minutes to talk with someone, you would only have time to talk, very quickly about each of those 3 things. If you had an hour-long presentation or a Q&A session, you'd have much longer time. So, thinking through how you would use that in different forms, I think is really important. But again, think about your audience. What is it that they're interested in? How is this work relevant to them? I know scientists oftentimes say, oh, but this is so valuable in terms of what we know in our knowledge building. And I understand that from a peer perspective and from a wanting to contribute to greater knowledge perspective. But really think through for your audiences, what is it going to be the most meaningful to them? How are they going to be able to relate to this research? How is it going to be useful to them in their lives? And that can really help you come down to 3 main messages. And then I would suggest you practice. Try someone, hopefully, that isn't in your field, maybe a friend or a family member, and try to talk through those 3 things and see what kinds of questions you get. And one other thing we often do in terms of helping scientists do this in person is have them kind of write out their messages and the things underneath them, and then cross out jargon. Because I think one of the things that's hardest is many scientists can get down to a 1-minute distillation of their work. But as soon as they get asked questions or they are asked to expound longer, that's when a lot of the jargon and the technical terms creep in. So one great way to practice that is to have kind of a conversation with someone. Say, these are the 3 things I want to talk to you about. See what types of questions they ask you, and then see if you're able to get out the messages you were hoping to.
Great, thank you very much. We did have Jessica Chaikin posted. Let me see if I can scroll back up here and find it in the chat box, a resource from CMS, and it's on written materials toolkit. So that was something for people to take a note of. We have a comment from John Kramer. The fragmentation of Facebook apps, for example, groups, messaging, pages, etc., is potentially interesting from a research methodology perspective. It gives some different tools for helping with research. If you'd like to comment on that.
Sure. I think if I understand correctly, that John, you're saying that there are opportunities to get different tools for helping with research engagement. So I think what you're saying is that there's potential citizen science pieces there in terms of getting information from others, but I'm not quite sure. So it's tough when you have an online chat, you're not able to ask back and forth.
It is a little bit
that
more
you're
often.
actually getting input from your audience directly through apps and different opportunities, which I think is great. I agree. I would say similarly in terms of online communication with comment sections in news sites and that type of thing, you get some interesting conversations that happen there. Sometimes if they're well moderated, particularly, can be really useful.
Right, right. Let's see. John is typing a little bit more. Let's see if we get something further from him. Also, I wanted to let you know, a couple people commented they've already gone to Trellis and they've signed up for Trellis. So
Great.
I thought you'd be interested in that.
Yes, we'll make sure we get those out.
Yeah, John has said that you covered what he wanted to have covered. We'll see if any more questions come up. We do have a couple people typing. In the meantime, definitely want to thank you very much, Tiffany, for covering a lot of great material. And also the workshop that you mentioned that's further in depth, we are going to be holding one of those workshops with AAAS in Washington, D.C., actually Alexandria, Virginia, on April the 5th of next year as a pre-conference workshop. And so I did put the name of the workshop in there and I sort of saved the date. This is going to be an in-person workshop on April 5th, and there'll be further information coming out about that, but it will be on a half-day workshop on communicating science, tools for disability and rehabilitation researchers, and AAAS will be carrying the content for that workshop.